Aaron Glenn's head coaching stock might have dropped with New Orleans Saints fans, but don't expect the Saints or any other NFL team for that matter to overreact to just one game. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, two more head coaching candidates are going to be on full display on Sunday. We'll take a look at Kliff Kingsbury, who all of a sudden is making a really good case for another opportunity as a head coach, all starting with the decision to not do what he had the opportunity to do. And of course, we're going to start everything off today with Detroit Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn gave up 45 points to Jayden Daniels and the Washington Commanders, and now fans really have kind of fallen out of love with Aaron Glenn. But will teams do the same? I'll explain to you why they will not. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show. This is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. A lot of New Orleans Saints fans falling out of love with Aaron Glenn and watching sort of the stock drop, but I don't think that the New Orleans Saints themselves nor any other NFL team will have the same reaction to what most fan bases had watching the Detroit Lions in a disappointing and surprising loss in their first game of the 2025 playoffs. Who would have thunk the Detroit Lions are one and done as the NFC's number one seed? So let's break it all down. Not only was it that the Detroit Lions defense, which Aaron Glenn pioneers, gave up, not only is it that they gave up 45 points to the Washington Commanders, but they gave up 45 points to a playoff team while they themselves are in the playoffs, of course, that's led by a rookie quarterback. Now, probably one of the best rookie quarterbacks we have seen in the league. Let's give Jayden Daniels his credit in this part of the conversation. But it's enough to make people ask questions, and it's enough for people to kind of say, ooh, not really feeling the defensive head coach type. And I think that's something that a lot of fans have been apprehensive about anyway. I personally prefer either the offensive head coach or the CEO head coach, probably the CEO head coach number one, and then the offensive coach number two with the defensive coach number three. But for me, I don't think that you're going to see NFL teams have the same level of reaction or overreaction, however it is that you want to quantify it, or qualify it rather, about this one game. But here's the thing for me. The Detroit Lions defense, which ranked number 30 against the pass this season, they were top 10 in scoring, and they were number 2 against the run. So I'll give them their flowers there, number 20 as a whole when it came to total offense. But they surrendered 29 points to the Seattle Seahawks. They surrendered, I believe it was 29 points as well, actually, to the Minnesota Vikings at an earlier point. 30 plus to the Green Bay Packers at one point, 34 points to a shorthanded San Francisco 49ers team, and then, of course, 48 points to the Buffalo Bills. But, of course, the Buffalo Bills, one of the best offenses in the league. So even if you take the best of the best out, you take Buffalo out, you take this Washington game out, there's still some concerning signs here about what happens when that Detroit Lions defense was going up against adequate competition, right? And in particular, in division competition as well, right? The amount of points that they gave up to the Minnesota Vikings mid-season versus the just 9 points that they gave up week 18, which was kind of the big selling point for Aaron Glenn. But then even that 9-point limit of the Minnesota Vikings was matched the very next week by the Los Angeles Rams, who also held the Minnesota Vikings immediately after to just 9 points. So just looking at kind of the reality of this, I do think that there's actually somewhere in the middle. I think while NFL teams are going to be willing to just kind of say, well, we're not worried about the worst of the worst or the best of the best. We're looking at everything in between. That's a fine way to look at things, but you truly have to look on the in between, because here's the thing. Do I think that it's fair to overreact to one game in a playoff game against one of the best rookie quarterbacks that we've ever seen in the NFL? No, I don't think that that's fair. And in fact, I think it's a little bit too drastic a shift in one direction. However, ignoring it entirely and saying, it's not a big deal, also too drastic a shift in the other direction. I think the fact of the matter is that the truth lies somewhere in the middle, which is why I look at this. You take Buffalo out, you take Washington out, you take all the best performances out, and you look at what's in the middle. Are you okay with 29 points to the Seattle Seahawks, 34 points to a beaten up, banged up, injured, and shorthanded San Francisco 49ers team? I think there's a lot of reason to ask question here, but do I think that the stock drop that we've seen for the fan bases is going to match the stock drop of the NFL franchises? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like most NFL teams are going to kind of go in and either have their questions. And look, you're going to have to grill Aaron Glenn in interviews now. You're going to have to say what happened. What would you do to prevent it? What would you do differently? Right? What got in your way? How do you address that? How do you kind of justify this, that, and the other? Like whatever it might be. You have to grill them at this point when it comes to these conversations. And you also have to wonder, and this to me is the biggest question when it comes to Aaron Glenn. We see so many coaches out there in the league that are better coordinators than they are head coaches. Dennis Allen was a great example of that. Fantastic defensive coordinator, not a strong head coach, right? Is Aaron Glenn the opposite of that? Is Aaron Glenn an example of one of the guys that would be an excellent head coach, but not as strong a coordinator, like a better coach than a coordinator? Sean Payton checked that box. Remember, Sean Payton got offensive play calling duties ripped away from him at an earlier point in his career, showed up in New Orleans, became a head coach, and pioneered one of the NFL's best defenses in modern history. That still actually holds the record in 2011 for most total yards gained in a season, despite the fact that the NFL has added a 17th game, and we played several 17-game seasons where we haven't seen anybody top that 7,474 mark that the New Orleans Saints set back in 2011. Just a fun fact. That's all I'm saying. But you see what I'm saying here? Not every great coordinator is a great head coach. What if not every great head coach is also not a great coordinator? So I don't think that you cross Aaron Glenn off of your list because of a playoff game if you're an NFL franchise. But maybe you come in with some different questions. Maybe you come in being a little bit more skeptical. Maybe you come in challenging a little bit more and expecting a little bit more in terms of what now needs to be proved, right? Like maybe the threshold is different, or maybe the benchmarks are different, or something like that. That I think is perfectly logical and is perfectly understandable. Now, look, I am still very much pro Joe Brady. I'm still very much pro Anthony Weaver, pro Kliff Kingsbury, but that's just me, right? I'm still a little pro Darren Rizzi as well because he gives you the CEO head coach, but you would have to change everything else around him in order to make that work for the fan base. And I think that's an important level of this, is selling this to the fan base. And so it's really interesting to just watch the almost in unison, the fan base kind of about face on Aaron Glenn and go, Now, some people were already not in on Aaron Glenn anyway because they didn't want the defensive head coach. I get that. And so for them, it was confirmation at that point, right? But for a lot of people, changed their minds after just one game. But I would not expect the Saints to do that and completely about face on a guy that has been heavily considered a favorite in this head coaching search, nor would I expect to see that from the rest of the NFL teams. But I do think that maybe the questions just got a little bit harder for Aaron Glenn when he finally gets to those in-person interviews, which he can now officially begin tomorrow on Monday, now that his team is no longer in the playoffs and the divisional round is almost done. Coming up next, while one side of the field, Aaron Glenn's stock was dropping, the other side of the field, Kliff Kingsbury, offensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders, his stock is skyrocketing, and it began before the game. Don't get it twisted. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs, the best place to go if you're looking for a quality hire for your small business. Right now, 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn has helped them find high quality candidates for their open job positions. Not just candidates, not just warm bodies, not just folks that can do the job, but high quality candidates, the type of candidates that you want to hire. And that's what LinkedIn is here to do. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you find the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the right decisions for your business. LinkedIn Jobs is the place to go if you're looking to hire. I've used LinkedIn Jobs before on the job search side and everything as a user is super easy to navigate, find, figure out, makes it super simple to get you connected if you're a business looking for a quality candidate like I once was. You can go ahead and hire smarter and make your next great hire with LinkedIn. Post your job today for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. If you're like me and you got tired of fantasy football and all the injury navigations, the bad trade requests, and then daily fantasy didn't work for you with all the mystery lineups and all the other stuff, I highly recommend giving Prize Picks a try. I absolutely love Prize Picks. It's you versus the house. It allows you to turn your sports opinions into real cash with daily fantasy player projections. It's just you versus projections. I took Jared Goff, more than 230 passing yards. I took Jayden Daniels for more passing yards as well. Got both of those. I've got Saquon Barkley anytime touchdown later on, more than one touchdown in the game later on up against the Los Angeles Rams. A ton for you to get in on. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players, choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their projections, and bang, you can win up to 1,000 times your money back. And there's a special offer for our Locked On listeners. Just download the Prize Picks app and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup on the Prize Picks app. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup on Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, family. While one coach's performance was forcing New Orleans Saints fans to become disenchanted with that candidate, New Orleans Saints fans may have been becoming more enchanted with another option in offensive coordinator Kliff Kingsbury of the Washington Commanders. Now, remember, Kliff Kingsbury has had a solid week, and his solid week began with a decision to not take interviews. His solid week did not start with a 45-31 victory as a major underdog, and in fact, I think the biggest underdog going into the divisional round. It didn't start there, right? It started when he said, hey, you know what? My team's in the playoffs, and I got a couple teams that want to talk to me about head coach stuff and everything like that, and that's all fine and dandy and good and well. But here's the deal. I got to coach a team that's in the playoffs. So I'm not going to take any interviews right now. I'll worry about interviews later if I'm no longer in the playoffs. But for right now, I'm focused on coaching my team, game planning, and putting together a game plan, rather, for this major opportunity that sat before not just him, but his coaching staff cohort, his players on both sides of the football. I know he only coaches the offensive side of the football, but you know what I mean? Showing up for his players, showing up for the rest of his coaching staff. It might have been the smartest decision that we've seen so far in the hiring cycle that had nothing to do with actually interviewing or taking steps towards getting a job anywhere. And in fact, by saying no, not right now, he might have gotten himself closer to getting himself a job somewhere. Now, I know that he's got a career losing record. No matter how it is that you look at it, he had one super good, strong season with the Arizona Cardinals. Things didn't work out altogether there. A lot of people feel like he was a scapegoat over in Arizona. A lot of people filed him under the same conversation as much better coordinator than head coach. All of that might still be true. But man, if you wanted to put yourself in position to get yourself another opportunity to be a head coach again in the NFL, this was the way to do it for Kliff Kingsbury. Just choose your team over yourself, to choose your coaching staff members and those players over yourself, and say, pause on my head coaching interviews, opportunities, conversations, virtual, it doesn't matter. Not interested in putting pause on all that, and instead saying, I'm going to coach my team. Excellent way to go about it. And then to turn that around into a massive upset victory, and a convincing one, not an accidental one, not a last-second field goal, not some missed extra point earlier in the game coming back to bite the Lions in the tail, a 14-point victory with an offense that absolutely churn and burn all game. They were excellent. Jayden Daniels, 299 passing yards, a pair of touchdowns, 122.9 passer rating, also added 51 rushing yards on 16 rushes. Brian Robinson Jr., 2 rushing touchdowns, 77 yards rushing over there. Diami Brown and Terry McLaurin, both over 85 receiving yards, getting Zach Ertz involved, getting Austin Eckler involved in the passing game, doing all the things that you needed to see Kliff Kingsbury do in order for that team to come out on top. All checked a bunch of boxes and just wrote brand new resume lines for him with every drive. By the way, can we quickly shout out Teddy Two Gloves for showing up in that game and leading a touchdown drive? How cool was that? But I digress. But here's the thing. In order for the New Orleans Saints to be the team where Kliff Kingsbury makes the most sense moving forward to potentially be hired there, and now we got to see just how far does Washington go in this conversation, because that will impact how and when Kliff Kingsbury becomes available to hire, to interview, do all these other things. If the Saints are going to be the best possible landing spot for him and potentially look to hire him, it's going to take a couple of years for them to get there. I love seeing the massive, and incredibly impressive turnaround of the Washington Commanders, but that is not what's going to happen for every team out there hiring a new head coach. And how impressive is it, right? New owner, new general manager, new head coach, new offensive, defensive, and special teams coordinators, only one returning starter on defense from 23 to 24, made additional changes over on the defensive side midseason, trading for Marshawn Lattimore at the trade deadline, for instance, bringing in the rookie quarterback with the 2nd overall selection, allowing the Bears to choose Caleb Williams ahead of them, not pushing to get up there and grab Caleb Williams, being perfectly happy with Jayden Daniels and clearly making the right decision there. And now they're in the NFC Championship game after a 4-6 win season last year, single-digit win season last year. Incredible. But in order to replicate that success, you're not going to be able to replicate the timeline. The Washington Commanders are the right blend of hard work, good work, smart work, lucky work. They are the perfect benefactors of all of that. Remember, worst offensive line going into the NFL, or going into the 2024 season. And yet that offensive line, though now it's potentially lost Samuel Cosmi for the rest of the offseason or rest of the postseason, has been outstanding in front of Jayden Daniels. And Jayden Daniels helps with his ability to escape. Kliff Kingsbury also helps with his scheme. So another positive in his direction. But let's look at the things that the New Orleans Saints would have to do in order to be ready to find that level of success with Kliff Kingsbury. Number one, got to find the right quarterback. They don't have the right quarterback. Baker Mayfield, Johnny Manziel, Caleb Williams, Kyler Murray, Jayden Daniels. Those are the quarterbacks with which Kliff Kingsbury has had the most success, college, NFL, otherwise. Derek Carr is not any of those quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler could be those quarterbacks. Got to see how he develops. Otherwise, you're going into the draft probably in 2026, or you're trying to land like a Justin Fields or something like that in free agency, which is a perfectly viable option. Defense needs an entire 180. Man, the defensive turnaround for the Washington Commanders has been absolutely outstanding, and the Saints would need to find a way to replicate that. But in order to replicate that, they need a new system, new scheme, new personnel, and they need youth over on the defensive side. That's going to take time because you need to make those adjustments basically at the majority of your positions over on the defensive side. A dominating wide receiver with solid compliments. The New Orleans Saints have the solid compliments, but they need the dominating wide receiver. Terry McLaurin's performance so far throughout the playoffs, and Terry McLaurin's performance, the Washington Commanders wide receiver with Jayden Daniels, has been phenomenal throughout 2024. You need someone like that. The Saints don't have someone like that. A go-to tight end that they can trust. I think you're close with Foster Moreau, but I wouldn't put it out of the Saints' ability to further address that position. Solid draft class, opportunity to continue to develop there, and opportunity to continue to develop guys like Dallin Holker, who are also still on your roster. So a little bit closer there. 1-2 punch at running back, historic running back draft class coming up, would be able to address that this season. All of it can be had, but some of it is going to take more time, like quarterback, revamping the defense, and figuring out what's going to happen with your offensive line as well. So look, Kliff Kingsbury has continued to raise his stock, and rightfully so. And he's done it incredibly well. Do I think that he's the perfect fit for the New Orleans Saints? No, but do I think that he would represent the level of change that the New Orleans Saints need to be willing to embrace in order to be able to quickly turn things around within the next couple of years? Very well could. Coming up next, there's a couple other guys that are out there that could represent similar change as well. Joe Brady and Kellen Moore, both of which will be on full display on Sunday. Let's break down what we're watching for and what it would take to make those guys work up next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and a great place to turn all of this NFL playoff action into even more exciting action from the first whistle to the final drive. And if you're a new customer right now, it gets even better. You bet $5 as a new customer. If you win that $5 bet, you get $300 in bonus bets. All you got to do is win that first $5 bet, put on a heavy favorite somewhere, turn around $300 to keep the action going. Later on today, you've got the Los Angeles Rams, 6.5-point underdogs up against the Philadelphia Eagles. I actually like the Rams in this matchup. Call me crazy. Then you've got the Baltimore Ravens favored 1.5 points on the road to Buffalo, going up against the Buffalo Bills. So Kellen Moore in that first window of action, Joe Brady in that second window of action. Lots for you to check out, learn about, and of course, walk away with some extra cash in there as well. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets by winning your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Make this NFL playoff even more unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Kellen Moore, Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator, will be on display here very soon, actually, in the early game between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams, while Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady will also be a big one to watch. And if you're asking me, I think Brady is the bigger one to watch. If I'm operating on vibes only, I still have Joe Brady as one of my top candidates for the New Orleans Saints. And in fact, he's continuously climbed higher and higher to the top, right alongside, if not slightly behind, in Aaron Glenn or something like that. And that's also me looking at the Saints and saying, what is it that the Saints want, and knowing how highly they regard Aaron Glenn. So that's kind of why Aaron Glenn's so pretty high for me too. But again, as I've mentioned before, I like the offensive head coach. I like the CEO head coach more than I like the defensive head coach. I don't know what it is, but it's just something about the split focus of head coach and defensive side of the football, defensive coordinator, that for whatever reason, it's just, I don't know what it is, but it just limits success. I think it's because when you're a defensive coordinator and you're prepping your defense, the real best way to do that is to understand offense as well. And so doing that while also having your charge of your defense, and while also being your head coach and doing this meeting and that meeting and the scouting and that scouting and all this other stuff, it just gets to be a lot. So I don't know what it is, but it doesn't work as great for me. Although I don't think that having a defensive-minded head coach means you won't find success, nor do I think that having an offensive-minded head coach means that you're guaranteed to find success. A good coach is a good coach. That's all that really matters. But I'm all about Joe Brady. And I'm about Joe Brady over Kellen Moore, in my opinion. Kellen Moore, to me, again, on vibes, because I haven't been in interviews with him and things like that. Just feels like one of those dudes that is incredibly smart, super smart, and would do really good things in terms of how he focuses on his offense, but would leave his defense behind. And that's my biggest concern with Kellen Moore. Joe Brady, though, to me, gives me a little bit more rugged, a little bit more of that kind of attitude guy that can make everybody kind of, follow along. And so I'm a little bit more of a Joe Brady guy myself, but I don't think that Kellen Moore is a bad coach by any means. I just don't know that he's the greatest fit for what New Orleans is in need of. Here's my plan for Joe Brady. Okay. And this is what I'm watching for from him. I just want to see him continue to find success with his run game with James Cook and the multitude of different things that he does with Josh Allen, moving the pocket, read options, zone reads, stuff like that. But also, allowing him to be able to just straight drop back and also run play action and also run RPO and all these other things. So just the expansive playbook, I think, is really, really helpful for an athletic quarterback. Now, this, for me, I mentioned earlier, I think that Joe Brady and Kellen Moore would also represent a little bit of the change that Kliff Kingsbury would represent as well. The reason being is that for Kellen Moore, you don't have the quarterback. For Joe Brady, you probably don't have the quarterback either. You want the athletic guys that can extend plays and do all these other things. And so, notwithstanding the young guys that are on the roster that we just simply don't know about yet, the Saints don't have that answer right now. But here would be my plan if I'm hiring Joe Brady, right? Here would be my plan. My plan would be hire Joe Brady, Make some adjustments over on the roster that you can make this year, including pulling a linebacker in this year's draft class. I'm looking at Ashton Ginty. I'm looking at Cam Scatterbo. I'm looking at Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. Any of those running backs, it's a historically good running back class. Dip in, get yourself a 1-2 punch of a young running back and a young rookie running back and Alvin Kamara. Add a tight end in this year's draft as well. Give yourself another big body pass catcher. Yes, you can go with the Tyler Warren. You can also go with the Harold Fannin Jr. out of Boston College? No, not Boston College. What school is Harold? Bowling Green. I knew it was one of those B schools. Bowling Green, who is my favorite tight end in this class. Arande Gadsden out of Syracuse. You can go with a Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame. Several really good options. Or you can go Tyler Warren. That's fine. I like Harold Fannin Jr. better. I think he's a more pure tight end and more modern day tight end. I think Tyler Warren he would have to specialize, I think, in the league. I think that like there's all of this great stuff that people can say, right? Like, oh, he can play a Taysom Hill role. Sure, maybe. But do you have the scheme now that will support a Taysom Hill role? Do you have the coaches now that can coach a Taysom Hill role? So on and so forth. We don't know the answers to those questions. So I'm avoiding that for right now. I want the tight end. Tight end. That's it. Oh, but I can throw. No. Oh, I can line up in the backfield and I can run. No. That's okay. I can tackle. I can be on special teams. That's fine. Tight end. Want a tight end. So for me, Harold Fannin Jr., Rondé Gadsden, Mitchell Evans are more ideal selections, in my opinion. It's just me. I can be wrong. It's fine. That's all good. Then next year, I'm drafting Drew Aller. Boy, you want to talk about somebody whose stock dropped with a fan base faster than you can imagine based on a game? Drew Aller was that guy. He had a not so great performance. I wouldn't even call it a not so great performance. A very not strong performance. A bad performance, in fact, up against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the college football playoffs. And it caused everyone to run away screaming from him. Not me. Not I, said the wise man. I will not be overreacting to a player struggling against a really good defense. We've seen this over and over again, right? Everybody hated, like a lot of people fell and they dropped their stock on AJ Terrell, for instance, the cornerback who's now with the Atlanta Falcons, spent his time with the Clemson Tigers, and everybody dropped his stock coming out of the draft because of the fact that he got torched by the LSU offense, the greatest college football team ever, and got torched by them in a was that the championship game? And what happened? Still turned into one of the league's better cornerbacks in the NFL. It's unfortunate that he's in Atlanta because he's really good. And so we've seen this over and over again to where somebody that is one member of one of the best college football teams goes up against one of the other best college football teams and struggles against one of the best college football teams, and everyone runs screaming from their stock. But then the NFL goes, I'll take a career over a game. And that's the way that I feel about Drew Aller. And he's got another year, right? 2025. Let's see how 2025 goes for him. But if 2025 goes well and you can give me a 6'5", 6'4", 220 plus mobile quarterback that can also make any throw on the field, that is highly intelligent, that can read defenses, that can look off safeties, that has good control of his ability to throttle a pass when he needs touch or put some mustard on it when he needs to gun it in, and he has the varying tempo and he knows how to play in a pro style offense and all those other things. Yeah, give me that guy to give to my new offensive minded head coach that helped to develop that guy in Buffalo. Am I saying that Drew Aller and Josh Allen are going to be the same? No. But archetypically, they're similar quarterbacks, big-bodied guys that can move better than you think that they can, and that have a diverse and dynamic range of what they could do with a football in their hand. So you give me him, you give me Joe Brady, you give me a running back in this year's class so that I have a 1-2 punch, and you give me a solid pass catching, another option at tight end, and give me a big-bodied wide receiver wherever you could find one. Continue to work on the offensive line, which is just kind of a given anyway, and bang. To me, I'm feeling really good about 2026, 2027 going into that range. So I'm really all about it. I'm pro Brady in this situation. And so let's see what he's got. Let's see what he shows up against it in a major game that's going to have a lot of pressure. And of course, it has a lot of stakes as they try to get to the AFC Championship game up against Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. But I think a lot of eyes are going to be on Joe Brady tonight, and rightfully so. So there you go. Joe Brady, Aaron Glenn, Kliff Kingsbury, Kellen Moore. We hit them all. We hit all that in today's show. And in tomorrow's show, I'm going to do 3 mock drafts. We're going to do a mock draft per segment, 4 rounds each. We're going to draft as if Aaron Glenn is the head coach. Then we're going to draft as if Joe Brady is the head coach. And we're going to draft as if Kliff Kingsbury is the head coach. And then see how different those mock drafts are. I'm looking forward to it. I think you're going to like it. I can't wait to tell you all about it in tomorrow's episode. Appreciate you very much, as always, for being here and for making us your first listen. For your second listen, go and check out Locked On NFL. And of course, we appreciate you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, let me know how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.